of terrestrial mammals to whales. And first I want to say what a cetacean is a aquatic mammal. So we're going to use that word a lot. And it was known during Darwin's time that cetaceans did come from land mammals. They had land ancestors, but the fossils weren't found yet. So the hypothesis for why mammals became whales is that the food availability was much more increased from abundant than land. But it was unknown, and a new fossil record provides us with the morphological, genetic, and developmental evidence.
So we have a little short animation about the evolution of whales. And I'm going to pause it briefly at a few different points and talk about it a little bit. Okay, so right here. Okay, so it begins with the Pakicetus, which is sometimes referred to as the first whale that was living. It lived on the margins of shallow waters, and it was known to feed on fish, and it has the body of a land animal, but it has the shape and the head of a whale, which provides some of the evidence. So you can see it as it's approaching the shallow waters. And then we have the Ambulocetus, which is referred to as a sea invader, and its name translates literally to walking whale that swims. And it lived in water and swam by paddling and with its legs, and it dived tucking in its forelimbs, and it gave powerful kicks with its hind limbs right there. And then we have the Cuchacetus, which lived about 43 to 46 million years ago. And it lived in the shallow seas, and it had longer hair no longer had hair since it had blubber now to insulate it, and it didn't need the hair for warmth. And then we have the Dorudon, which lived between 34 and 40 million years ago. Its nostrils moved further back on its head, and it developed a blowhole for breathing. And its forelimbs became more paddle-like, which helped it swim. And then its vertebral column back here developed into like an up and down movement to help it paddle through the water. And you can see that the tail fin was finally developing. And then we have some of these synapomorphies in our phylogenetic tree, but we're going to play this video one more time without animation. So you can see clearly the different stages. So right here on our phylogenetic tree is the Pakicetus. And then the Ambulocetus right here. Then the Cuchacetus. And then finally the Dorudon. So you can see how not all of these descendants were on this video, but we're going to talk about evidence about them, and we're going to show how terrestrial mammals came into whales. So Chris Murray is going to talk about developmental.
So I'm going to talk about developmental, and the first thing I'm going to mention is the Hox gene. And what the Hox gene does is that it regulates development. But more specifically, it regulates development in tetrapods, their fins and their hind limbs and their forelimbs, which is what F and H are in these pictures, and also these pictures right here. And there's a secondary role of the Hox gene as well. And what it does, it explains like why limb loss was happening throughout the phylogenetic tree, because we can see that in the Dorudon, like he has, we don't know if it's he or she, but the hind limb is really, really small, and so limb loss was happening throughout the phylogenetic tree. And the secondary role basically tells us that the gene is expressed in different ways throughout different organisms. So like in a snake, this gene isn't expressed even though it may be in their gene code, but in a whale, the gene is expressed, which is why we see that it is even pretty small, even though like scientists do believe that it's inside of their body wall. And another thing in developmental is apoptosis, and what that is the process of cells dying off in multicellular organisms. And in humans, that's why we have fingers and that's why we have toes, because we all start off with these like weird-looking forelimbs and hindlimbs, but the skin dissolves between our fingers and it dissolves between our toes. But in whales and in dolphins and other web-toed creatures and mammals and things like that, their skin does not dissolve, so that's why they have fins. So that's why we can see through the next two species of whales that they have fins. And after the Durandon, the Odontintus and the Mysticosintus, we can see that they have two visible, even though that we can see their fins are here, we can still see that they have skeletal fingers because apoptosis still was occurring, but they don't have webbed feet. And another thing in developmental is the characteristics of hair and fur, because we all know that hair and fur is a characteristic of mammals. And in this picture here, you can see that there is whiskers on a dolphin, and this dolphin is called the pantrophic dolphin. And even though that this dolphin has whiskers, it's not a mammal, obviously, but it suggests that it has mammal ancestry, which kind of like goes along with how whales descended from terrestrial.
Now we're going to talk about morphological evolution.
Okay, so first off, the ear. So cetaceans have very unique bone shape in their ears. They have what's called an involucrum, which is a thick internal wall of the ear, and other normal mammals have just all around external and internal thickness of the ear, and it has to do with sound transmission. It's a very ancient cetacean trait, and it's common in fossil and recent whales, but it's uncommon in mammals. And however, it is found in the Indohyus, which is the first ancestor of the tree. The teeth, they have different ratios of isotopes on their teeth from land and aquatic mammals. And the Indohyus shows that it lives in water because it has a different ratio than normal land mammals. This is the Pakicetus, and it is the most archaic cetacean found. It had wear on its teeth that are very common with fish eaters, and it implies that their jaw and their teeth were different than normal mammals because they did live by shallow water or the bone density is a very important part of whale evolution, and normal land mammals have very thin bone and they have a lot of bone marrow, but the Indohyus has a considerably less bone marrow content than others, with only 42% bone marrow, and land mammals have 60% bone marrow. This is because land mammals need less bone density so they can move on land easier and spend less energy. But this is just sound to be honest, I'm just gonna. Okay, so hippos have bone density very similar to whales because they have similar bone density to whales because they're osteochoric, and that means they have heavy bones, which is common in water waders, and lets them get deep and get the food that they need necessary in the water. So this is the Remington cetus. It's not on the tree because we couldn't find exactly where it was placed, but it's somewhere between the Ambulocetus and the Cutrocetus, so just whereabouts. And it has short limbs and a very powerful tail, and it shows that it's very similar to whales because it does move its dorsoventral tail up and down, and it kind of shows that its limbs are unnecessary because they didn't really use them. They only use them for steering. They use their tail to let them move and get to the food that they wanted. And their food habits changed because they used to live on land, and they did eat land vertebrates, but they're altered because now whales do eat small fish, and they even have baleen now. Shows a different pattern than that. And they have very big eyes now, and that is because the land mammals like the Indo-Hyas, they lived in like murky environments. Their vision wasn't very important to them, and now the whales live in deep ocean. They need to be able to see where their prey is. The pelvis, early cetaceans had pelvis similar to terrestrial mammals, but now the pelvis becomes disconnected from the vertebrate, and the ilium is highly reduced. So it just shows that this is the ilium right here, and it's just slowly disappearing, and the acetabulum is where the hip connects to the femur, so that is slowly disappearing too because they don't have legs. The skull and the blowhole. So the Protocetus is more recent than the Remington cetus, which we just talked about, and it is close to whales because you can see that its eye position is becoming more lateral, and the nostril position is moving more towards the head, foreshadowing the blowhole. And it's unlike other cetaceans because of its snout.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about molecular evidence. The molecular evidence that I found supports evidence that whales, that their relationship with currently living terrestrial animals like the hippo. So this is a hypothesis, and the evidence that I'm going to talk about supports that hypothesis, but it doesn't exactly prove it. But in the first study, researchers compared the kappa-casein and the beta-casein gene, which is the milk protein gene, which is in all mammals. And then they also compared the cytochrome C oxidase gene, which is a mitochondrial DNA, which is used in cell respiration. And they did this between artiodactyls and cetaceans. And what Kendall said earlier, cetacea is an order of marine animals, which includes whales and porpoises and dolphins. And then it's also separated into two subgroups, toothed whales and baleen whales. And then artiodactyls are referred to as even-toed ungulates, and it includes animals such as pigs, hippos, camels, and other hoofed animals. So what the researchers did was they gathered the DNA from these species, and then they amplified it through a polymerase chain reaction and compared it to other previously published DNA sequences. And what they found supported the hypothesis that the cetaceans and the artiodactyls are sister taxa. And here we underline the differences in the, this is just a small portion that we wrote down from the published beta-casein gene sequence of these four species. And as you can see, there are more differences between the hippo and the camel than that the hippo has with the two whales. And so that supports that they could possibly be more closely related than a hippo and a camel, even though they are considered both artiodactyls. And then the second study did something very similar. It compared the DNA sequence of the gamma fibrinogen gene, which is a blood clotting protein, but they used a few more groups of species in this. They also used perissodactyls, which are odd-toed ungulates also, and they found the evidence that they gathered supported that these two groups of species are also a clade. So.
Okay, questions for this group?
What species was it that the rear limbs are believed to still be there, but in the, you said they were like in the,
Body wall.
Yeah.
That's the Durandon. Let me turn it over. This one. They're basically like vestigial limbs, so like they're there, but they're not used for anything. So, yeah, they just float there. So as they continue, like as the species continues, you see like they don't really have any more hind limbs. So it's like kind of like the continuation into a more aquatic lifestyle.
Yeah, they're slowly losing those hind limbs.
What exactly did you say caused the shift from like land to sea? You said there was like more of an abundance in food supply in the sea. Was there any other like hypothesis as to why that occurred?
Well, the only hypothesis I could find was that they had more abundant food in the sea, but it's still unknown. Like they do not know that for sure because of how the ancestors did live close to shallow water, so they can't really pinpoint it.
Like the video showed how the Pakicetus just like walked around on the shallow waters, and that's where they probably went to go feed on fish because evidence does support that that is what they fed on.
Yeah, most of these were like semi-aquatic, so they would live on land and live in, and like semi-live in the sea as well. So maybe they like to see a little bit more. You know.
So where do you have to go to find whale fossils? Do you have to go to the bottom of the ocean? Where were all these fossils
I
found?
think it was sedimentary rock. They said, but I'm not really positive. Mine was mainly on shore, so I think I read one part. That says something about it, but
Was it India?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
India. Be
I didn't
confident.
know-
You know
I
it.
didn't know if I read that somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, in Pakistan and India,
Okay.
where there used to be ocean, but
Okay, yeah. I didn't want to like.
yeah.
No, it's okay.
I thought you knew it from when we talked before.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you guys.